What's up, Dragon Ball Super family? I'm Legends Kerrick, and I just finished X1 slash fifth place at the California Regional this weekend. My teammate Robert DeCosta and I played very similar list for kidku, so if you haven't already, go watch his profile if you want a quick snapshot of the deck. For this deck profile, I'm going to really talk about the decisions we made, why we chose some of these cards, and how you can utilize these cards in this deck profile. Um, my matches for the weekend were 2 SS4 Vegito Black, 2 Blue Tapion, 1 Green Gohan, 1 Reboot Cell, and 1 Red Brawly. I think of the tier 1 like meta decks in the game, I think Vegito X is probably our most favorable matchup. You just have so many tools naturally built into your deck to beat that matchup. And I think of the tier 1 metas, the probably the hardest matchup for the deck involved Green Gohan if you go second, and then just Tapion, it's about a 50-50 the whole time, and it requires you to play really well. I had a really fun time at the event. It was really fun seeing all of y'all. But before we get into that, let's jump right into this deck profile. So, like I said, we played Red Skill-less for this event. It's the BT25 Son Goku childhood leader. On the front side, his auto is simply when this card attacks, you draw a card. He's got a really cool activate main. Once per turn, you can add up to 1 card from your life to your hand. And then if you afterwards, you can place up to 1 skillless card from your deck in your drop. So you're going to want to trigger this about 2 times before you awaken, ideally. And then his awaken is simply just awaken at 4 life. It is an awaken on turn 2 leader, whether your opponent interacts with you or not, and we'll talk about how to do that as we get further into the deck profile. On the backside, he's a draw 2 once you awaken, and his auto now becomes when your red originally skillless battle card is played, draw 1 card once per turn, so that's either player's turn. And then not once per turn, auto, when one of your 30k red battle cards is played, you can choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards and or unisons and reduce its power by 15k. So this is really cool for board removal. Finally, his activate main is you may play 1 red skillless battle card from your Z deck or your hand. If you do, negate this skill for the turn. So it's worded this way specifically so that if your opponent tries to activate a counterplay in window 1, you just choose not to play a card because it says you may, right? So you'll activate the skill and they respond with a counterplay in window 1 to try to like send your skillless to the drop instead of being played. You'll choose to resolve that skill by not playing a skillless. Therefore, you did not play a skillless, and since you did not, it does not negate the skill for the turn. This is worded very differently from Tapion's skill, where he says you may play up to 2 of the cards that were comboed. In that scenario, if you choose not to play a card in response to a counterplay, you still fulfill that effect because you played 0, which is up to 2. So that's pretty neat. As usual, we'll start with our starters. We played 4 copies of Bulma Party Hostess. So typically this is the starter you want to open on, which is why we play 4 of her. She just allows you to shuffle your deck, which is really relevant because a lot of decks, their answer to your skillless is to typically bottom deck or remove them, send them to the warp. You can't do anything about them getting sent to the warp, but if you do get them bottom deck, this is a good way to get them back shuffled into your deck. Additionally, it lets you search your deck for like your Chi-Chi, your Bulma Bunny Girls, and your super combos. Those are like the best cards in your deck, right? So that's why we play 4 copies of her. And then 2 copies of this Bulma World Protection Support. We wanted 6 starters in the deck so that you had as much consistency as you possibly could without playing like too many dead cards in the deck. And this was just the second best starter you can find. She's simply a draw 1 and then activate main. You can place her from the battle area into the drop to add a 30k skillless from the drop back to your hand. I think it's just 1 red skillless, but you're only adding a 30k skillless from the drop to your hand. This does come up. Sometimes you will battle Bunny Girl one of these targets, especially if you've already used your leader's auto to draw on your opponent's turn. Like let's say you Chaozu's on your opponent's turn, and so you've already used the draw. When you Bulma Bunny Girl later that turn, you're not going to want to revive another skillless unless you're just looking for the pressure. Instead, I typically revive a Bulma so I maintain the card advantage. And if you're looking to play a skillless 30k from your hand the following turn, reviving this Bulma works really well because you can just draw the card, and if it does make it back to your turn cycle, you can put in the drop to pick up that skillless to continue your plays. So typically, I'll try to play one of these in the opening of the game, and then afterwards, they're pretty much all just energy forever. I'll try to get one of them into the drop, so 1 of each in the drop. But otherwise, like I said, they might as well say energy after turn 1. Your choice is skillless. There are 12 Earthling, or I think there's like 4 different Earthling skillless that you can play. Um, 2 of them come in foil, 2 of them don't, so take your pick. I just wasn't ready to play this deck for this event, so I had to use the launches and then the 2 Grandpa Gohans that were in my collection. I think in the future, I'm probably going to trim down the skillless count to like 5 or 4. 6 was a lot. You don't really want to be drawing these guys, even though you can play them from hand with your leader. That's kind of not really advantageous. Like you get a 30k attacker that like really doesn't have any other impact on the board. So, and most of the game I found myself playing with just the two that I buried at the start of the game, and then any other skillless I found myself playing typically happened out of like Chi-Chi or Bulma, and I was just comboing these cards. So I probably will reduce this to 5 or 4 in the future. And then the cards you want to search for to have by turn 2. 4 copies of Chiaotzu Sibling Trust. So Chiaotzu is one of the 3 cards that I consider to be like really powerful in this deck, right? It's a 1 energy counterplay, and if your leader is red, you just play this card. And then it's auto limit 1. If your life is at 4 or less when this card is played, you get to play up to 1 red skill-less battle card from your drop area, right? So that's pretty cool. On your opponent's turn, it lets you for 1 energy, play this card, and then your leader will trigger drawing you a card and reducing something by 15k, whether that being a battle card or unison. And his permanent says if you already have a 30k skillless on the field, you can play this card without paying its energy cost. Only out during your opponent's turn, though. So why I think this is one of the most powerful cards in the game right now is if you go first and you on your turn 2 you leave 1 energy up for Chiaotzu, you're going to be at 4 life on your turn 2. And we'll go through that sequence at the end of the video for those who like want to know it. But if you go first and you hold up Chiaotzu on your turn 2, most decks on their turn 2 need to play a 15k or lower creature to get started. Like Tapion needs to play an arms or legs to awaken, right? Green Gohan wants to play the Vegeta from underneath the hyperbolic time chamber. Majin Buu, the new blue Buu deck, wants to play like a unison. Well, for 1 energy, since you're automatically at 4 energy, for 1 energy you create attacker, recycle the card that was played from your hand because you draw a card, and then you kill their 15k or less before it gets to do anything. This kind of gatekeeps a lot of decks from being able to play the game, right? So I think that makes this card one of the strongest cards in the game. Not to mention when it does get played, if it does draw to replace itself, you're getting yourself a free 5k combo and a 30k attacker for the following turn, or an extra 5k combo if you decide not to need the skillless. Next to Chiaotzu, for cards we want to have in our hand by turn 2, we have 4 copies of Bulma the Bunny Girl, the second card that makes this deck just super powerful. Bulma the Bunny Girl has an auto, where when one of your red Earthlings cards other than Bulma is removed from your battle area by an opponent's skill, you may play this card from your hand without paying its energy cost. If you do, you can play up to 1 red Earthling battle card with an energy cost 4 or less from your drop. It's notable that this is all 1 action. So like if you wait for the Bulma to come down and then you try to like wait for a second window to hit the next card, it doesn't make sense, right? Like it comes down together. Like it plays herself and then the auto resolves to play the second one. There's not like second extra window created. It's really weird. She is a unique blocker, so you can't have an extra one down, but typically if your opponent removes one of your skillless, she's just going to revive a skillless, right? So it kind of makes like removing cards against this deck really for naught. But more importantly, Chiaotzu, like I said, your opponent can't stop you from playing Chiaotzu. So Chiaotzu will revive their skillless, and then Bulma will revive like a way to draw a card, and then give you a free blocker. And so a lot of your defense really costs 0 energy in this deck, which is one of the problems with the deck right now. And then we move on to our turn 3 line. So one of our turn 3 lines is Baby Juvenile Parasite. It's very safe to tap out in this deck for 3 energy. You go to a 16k leader. You have 6 life when you awaken, and you get to play with 6 life for a lot of the game. Baby allows you to maintain your hand advantage. It kidnaps skillless in the mirror match so that your opponent can't use their skillless. The consistent attacker as a unison is very powerful, and it supplements the use of Videl encountering danger, right? Videl encountering danger is just being a free counterplay, adding to like just a pile of free defense that you get to play in this deck. She comes down for counterplay, and if she does, as an auto speed, she Spirit Boost 1 to reduce 2 cards by 20k, which of course then paired later with your leader ability to reduce something by an additional 15k, let's say off Bunny Girl or Chiaotzu, means you can tank most battle cards out of the game. Our alternate turn 3 play is the Son Goku Attack to Save the World. The Son Goku can be played if either player controls a 30k creature with 30k or more power. So this is very helpful in the Vegito X matchup when they go to set up their 6-drop barrier blocker and they pass to you. You can start your turn by activating main, paying 2 energy on this card to play itself and a skillless from the drop. all in the activate main window. Oops, sorry, skill-less. And then as its auto, if you control a red skill-less card, that was originally skill-less, you can choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with a energy cost of, or sorry, with ignoring barrier, choose one of your opponent's battle cards with the power of 30k or more and KO, or 30k or less and KO it. I'm sorry. This is notable because in addition to getting to KO a 30k or less battle card, since you play two 30ks off your leader, or your leader will then trigger reducing two cards by 15k, whether that be battle cards or unisons. You can even choose the same card twice, and you can order your autos however you want in this game. So let's say you use the activate main to play this card and this card together. Before you use this auto, you can use your leader's autos once or twice to reduce some cards below the 30,000 threshold so that this card can pop it afterwards. It's a pretty sickening interaction. It's not too powerful of a card because it does eat up your like free draw for turn, since it does play the skill-less for you, so it does burn your draw. Then every other card you play for the rest of the turn isn't like a free plus. But two 30k attackers is nothing to scoff at. Plus he himself is a 30k double strike attacker. Pretty powerful. Next, moving on, we have some of our turn 4 plays, and later in the game, 2 copies of Son Gohan, Self-Taught Truth. So we were really looking for ways for this deck to draw, right? Like one of the weaknesses is this deck typically cycles, or it functions like an aggro deck. At least that's what Bandai intended. So your hand would start dwindling over the course of the game. Son Gohan, Self-Taught Truth, it's just one energy, quick. You can draw a card, play itself, and then it's a quick 20k threat. By the time you're on turn 4 or 5, you have a bunch of excess energy to use, so that second energy could be used to restand this card and give it double strike, while of course reducing some other card by 20k. Also, being an Earthling means that like if you do play it early, it's pretty rare for people to want to remove it, because if they do remove it by skill, like you just bunny girl and then you turn that card into a free skillless, and now they have to deal with the skillless as well. And of course, our last turn 4 or 5 play, we have Tien Shinhan, Full Power Fighting. This is probably my least favorite card in the deck. Its auto is when you combo with this card, you can choose up to one of your skillless cards. It gains critical. So you turn your skillless into a 35 critical base effectively. And then, of course, its activate main is where it really shines. For 1 energy, if your leader is red and you have 3 more energy, is a red this and you have 3 more energy. You can play this card in the activate main window, play this card and a 30k skillless from your deck. So that's pretty cool. If you like just need to access a 30k skillless so you can access your Goku to be able to, like, you need a 30k on the board and you just didn't have one in hand, like this is a good way to do it. Honestly, moving forward, I probably won't play this card at more than 2. It's really clunky early game. You find yourself charging it or siding it out a lot, and the pressure it puts down, like by the time this card comes down, turn 3 or 4, or even 5, like the 15k portion of this card doesn't really matter, and the 30k skillless portion also kind of doesn't really matter, right? Like skillless really hit hard early game, like before skills take over the game, but once you get to like turn 4 or 5, cards that actually have text on them start becoming more valuable. Moving into our defense, we play the full suite of foretesting the opposition. Our leader immediately goes to 4 life, or if we're going second, we can immediately put ourselves at 5 life so that we can have this life to avoid any kind of early game crits and shenanigans. And speaking of putting ourselves to 4 life immediately, we play a full suite of Explosive Dance. Our leader naturally creates a red Z extra and puts ourselves at 4 life. So Explosive Dance is live right away, which is probably one of the most egregiously broken parts about the deck. Following that defense, we have 2 copies of Broly, Omen of Evolution. There's a really cool line where if your opponent starts with a battle card at your red leader, which everybody should be starting with a battle card when they're attacking a red leader, to play around Explosive Dance, and then they swing with their leader afterwards to create a combo to keep playing the turn, you can activate Omen of Evolution to put this card in the drop. On your defensive step, you can combo with this, put this in the drop to put your opponent's combo card in the drop so that they have 0 Z energy and their turn is effectively over. It also has some niche applications versus like Vegito X in the early game, in case you want to delay their awakening even harder. So that's pretty cool. Moving forward, to finish out our defense, we have 4 copies of the Raditz Saiyan Youth. You can play a plethora of different super combos in here. Raditz Saiyan Youth, it's because it's immediately on. Like I said earlier, your leader immediately goes to 4 life, right? So this card is immediately active. You can use it to defend. Let's say you chose to go second, or you are going second. Sorry, you don't get to choose. Let's say you are going second, and you did that line I told you about where you jump to 5 life immediately. You testing down to 4, and then now you want to defend so you can stay on your front side awakened. This is a great way to do that. Also, the fact that he cycles and sees 2 cards instead of 1 means you can get to your SCR faster. We are playing a hard 50. We do want to see the Vegito SCR. like most skillless decks, not having text on our cards means the longer the game goes, the worse this game gets for this deck, despite the fact that they're 30Ks, right? So we want to find our SCR as fast as possible so we can close out the game by turn 4 or 5. Speaking of the SCR, we have SS4 Vegito, a light in the dark. I'm sure you could play the new Red Kidku SCR, the 3 mana one, but like nothing compares to 0 mana attacker, right? So being able to look at your opponent's hand, being a 0 mana threat after you've already played all your threats for that turn, it's unexchangeable. You do have to overwhelm, but it's pretty easy to set up overwhelm in this deck, and that's your hard 15 main deck. We'll go into the side or the extra deck next. Play, our energy marker, gotta have it. Your 7-man token, gotta have those. And then we'll talk about the third most broken card in this deck, next to Chatsu and Bunny Girl. We have Super Water of the Gods, Exchange for Suffering. It's just a 1/1, so typically you'll activate this. If you're going first, you'll play this going on turn 2. If you're going second, try to, in your testing, look for scenarios where you get to play this card on turn 1. It's permanent. You can't place cards under this, or you can't play cards under this card except with this card's skills. That's important, so it future-proofs it from being able to cheat extra life underneath. Auto, if your leader is this thing, and when this card is played, you get to take 2 of your life face up and put it underneath this card. And then as an activate main, at any time, or sorry, as an activate battle, anytime you can add 2 cards from underneath this card to your life, and then remove this card from the game, and being a Son Goku childhood, which includes your leader. Those life, since they are face up underneath this card, they do go back to your life face up. That's the current ruling. I don't know if that's going to stand, but that's really important because if you find your SCR or your super combo, you'll know when you want to pop this early just for tempo to be able to grab your SCR or your super combo out of there. So that's pretty neat. Also, if your SCR just happens to be your last life, you can pop this card to put these life here and then just grab your last life when you're taking the damage. So that's pretty neat as well. You get to effectively play with all 8 life if you choose. What makes this card so broken is it puts you temporarily to 4, so you can activate cards like your Raditz super combos or your explosive dances or even your testings get on super early, right? But whenever you decide, you can choose to set your life back to 6 or just get those 2 life, right? Activate battle speed, so your opponent can't really dump on you at 1 life unless they're going with a triple striker, right? But even then, that like bean effect is very important. Like I said, it is a red extra card, so turning on explosive dance right away is really strong. If you're looking for ways to beat this deck, I mean the common ways right now are to try to warp the skillless, remove them from the game, but I would suggest taking a different route and just trying to play around these 3 cards, right? So what I mean by that is like if you're an aggressive deck, before Kidku can awaken, or before they can play this card, let's say Kidku goes first and you have 1 energy, try to do as much as you can to push that deck down past their 4 life, like down to 4 life as much as you can, or even 5 life, right? Put them in a position where like playing this card isn't worth it for them. Now they don't have access to this incredibly powerful effect. Or if they decide to go second and they didn't create the waters on their turn 1, now that's a go button. Like on your turn 2, if you can, try to do your most aggressive line to push them as far as you can. That way they aren't forced to play this. Yes, they can play the 10 times Kamehameha as a backup Z extra, which they kind of have to be able to use Explosive Dance, right? So they still have to go back the mana, but they don't get access to this insane effect. And then, of course, there are 2 counterplays. So, like, if you play stuff like CoreTCG before you go in, or you play counterplays to prevent these cards from coming in, then you can prevent their tempo gain, which is a really good way to beat this deck as well. Following that Z card, we have, ironically, the next 4 most broken Z cards in the deck. We have 4 copies of the Tien Shin Han vanilla card in the Z deck. So the leader allows us once per turn activate main to play up to 1 skillless from we may play a skillless from our hand or Z deck. Most of the time we're going to play it from our Z deck. If we play it from our hand, we spend the card from our hand just to cycle a card, so we go net 0 and we have a 30k on the board. Whereas if we play the card from the Z deck, we draw a card and we create an attacker, so that's actually a net +2, which is really, it's pretty rare in Dragon Ball for a leader. Honestly, I can't even think of another that actually goes hard +2. Just on a leader skill. So this might be, this adds to why this card's so broken. It's a free 20k attacker, which checks most other battle cards and or unisons, or you can just poke it at the leader, force a super combo out, or if they're above 6 life, or above 4 life, I'm sorry, they'll probably just take the damage. And then what's even more annoying is that they chose to make this Tien Shin Han an Earthling, right? If they chose to make it a Saiyan card, this card wouldn't have been as powerful. But because it's an Earthling, like people typically don't want to remove this card, so it's a constant attacker every turn, and they don't want to remove it because if they do, you're gonna Bunny Girl it, and then it goes from becoming, or it goes from being a 20k into a 30k that they have to deal with. So they had to spend 2 forms of removal to deal with one of your attackers that you created for free and drew a card from playing. So, like I said, if you don't have to play the skill list from hand, playing the Tien Shinhan from Z deck is so much more powerful. Following up, we have 3 copies of Son Goku Nonstop Attack. Typically, you'll find yourself only playing 2 in a game, but there are so many games in testing where we found we just wanted the third, right? So what it does is it's a 3/2, but if you have a 30k skill list on the board, or sorry, if you have a red battle card with 30k or more power on the board, this reduce the energy cost of this card by 2. So that includes your SCR, like if you played Vegito and you just have the energy left over because you were saving for Explosive Dance, but now you need the extra reach, but you don't have a skill list on the board, you could play this card just to get that little bit of extra reach, which is really neat. On play, as a limit 1, you KO a 30k or less, not ignoring barrier. And then as an activate battle, once per turn, you can place one of your skill lists, your 30k skill list from the field into the drop, or 30k creatures from the field into the drop. And this card gets 9k power and double strike for the battle. Notably, this part of this card is not limit 1. So if you do get you like swing with this and you get the double strike in and you still have extra energy left and extra Z energy, you can create another one, then swing with this, sacrifice another 30k or more. Obviously, you cannot sacrifice the SCR because it cannot be placed in the drop for the cost of the effects, but you have a bunch of extra 30ks that have already done their job that have no lasting impact. Like, if you had already made this play for 3 energy out of your 4, like, this is a really powerful play. You make this play to create the 2, right? You swing with both, then you play this card, you swing with this card, placing this in the drop, protecting it from removal. And then later, since you still have another 30k, you can play this, attack with this one, and put this one in the drop to get the double strike. And so, like, for 3 energy, you put out 3 double strikes of 25k power or more, plus a single strike skillless. And that's before your leader played a free card, right? So your leader could play a free TN, it could play a free skillless. For 3 energy, that's a little bit too much pressure. But just that line showed you that we used 2 right away. That's 4 energy altogether, right? So, like, sometimes you just need the 3rd copy to reach for the rest of the game. We play 1 copy of the 10x Mighty Blast. Like I said, this is just a backup copy of Waters. Say you're forced to pop your Waters early, or some reason you couldn't play the Waters. You're going to need some kind of Z extra, red Z extra down there so you can activate Explosive Dance for the Floodgate. This is just the best option out there. And then finally, this could be any slot. This could be Rush Attack, this could be Defender of Life. But what we found worked the best was CSG Son Goku, Crimson Deity, Crimson Guardian Deity. It's a 4 energy card, which is pretty costly for this deck, but it is a board wipe. And this deck, it has a lot of like tall removal and like 15k small removal, right? So for -2, you can reduce your entire opponent's board by 25k, and then being your leader, like give your leader 5k for the turn. It's got barrier, so it's very hard. Like green can't just remove the markers off of this for free. Its -1 is also really strong. It lets you restand this card, then choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, and reduce it by 25k, turning it into effectively a dual attack card. And it naturally has double strike. So versus like when you get flooded out by like Nimbus or Defending Friends, or you're playing against Hachiyak, that's where this card really shines. That's a simple 10 card Z deck. One of my favorite things about this deck is if you're a beginner to this game, the SCR obviously is a bit pricey, but the rest of the deck in low rarity probably costs you about $50 to $100 altogether, which is awesome. It's like a tier 1 powerful deck for less than maybe $200 altogether, and that's like a great price entry to get into any kind of competitive game. You could sleeve up this entire deck for that much and go to an event, and as long as you're playing well, you could definitely take an event with this. Looking into our side decks, so side decks change depending on every format. This was the first event of this format, so we don't really know where this format's going to sit, but based on our best guesses, this is what we came up with. We have 2 copies of Shu, King Piccolo's Underling. This is for stuff like the Tapion matchup, where you can hit their defending friends and you can hit their 1-drops when they try to play them. This is also really good for the mirror match. You can hit Bunny Girl and Chaozu. This is really good for Hachiyak. You can hit the Oceania Shenron Floodgate. This is really good for the Red Broly swap matchup, where you can hit their 1-drops before as they attempt to play them, which then screws up their entire chain. Really good card. 2 copies of Broly Crown of Retribution. This card's typically for Black Hachiyak, so obviously we go really wide and we have no 8 drops or higher. So Hachiyak's like one of our worst matchups, so we don't want to automatically lose into that matchup. So Broly Crown, really good into that. Any kind of like heavy control deck, if they can get the game past turn 5 or 6, they probably do win versus us. So this is a really good card for like Bulma as well. I don't really know what other control matches we're really fearing, but Bulma and Hatchick, these are the respect cards for it. If your opponent has 2 or more energy when this card resolves, you get to look at their hand and rip a card that's 20k or less, a battle card 20k or less. I felt like I had to explain this because I feel like Crown hasn't been part of the meta for a long time. 3 copies of Koitsukai. This is just the format. I think you're going to see this in all my teammates' decks for a while. Every deck in this format's trying to play on your opponent's turn some way or another, whether that be a battle card floodgate or some kind of advantage engine on the opponent's turn, like Tapion, advantage engine on the opponent's turn. Kidku, its defense is completely battle card based on the opponent's turn, other than the explosive dance. Right? Like you can just find multiple applications for it. Blue in general, with the blue Majin Buu card, the SR, I think the Chunky Buu SR, this card's a great way to just force them not to get the advantage off that. 1 copy of King Vegeta Hidden Ambition. So this is just that anti-green card. Typically, you use it just when you're going against green. You dare them to tap out and try to bank on Uneasing Floodgate or Dormant for free, and then you can slam this down. Versus blue, it's very handy because blue likes. Sometimes you can force blue to tap out with your standard standard aggression on turn 4, and they're tapped out and they're relying on D Magic for that. Untap. So when you get them to that point where they tap out, you can slam your Vegito SCR, rip out any Zenos that they were relying on, and then swing with your Quad Strike, and then sparking. When they go to sparking their D Magic, you can hit the D Magic and end the game from there. We have 1 copy of Begrudging Allies. This was just yet another respect card to Hatch. And Bulma more than Hatch. So we wanted to be able to hit Topo. The counter attack Topo that's in red, and obviously none of the red standard counterplays hit it very well, so Begrudging Allies was a good catch-all to hit that. Of course, it still works as a standard counterplay for all the other matchups where we'd want to use a counterplay, so that's pretty cool. If you have 4 or less life, it costs 1 less, and your leader runs to 4 or less life, so it's immediately 1 cost in this deck, which is pretty cool. 1 copy of SSB Vegeta Pure-Blooded Sparking. This is both for Hatch and the Gogeta matchup. So we only do minus 15Ks in this deck, and the Gogeta SCR is a 40/45K. I actually don't know. It's pretty high up there. Regardless, it would take 3 30Ks to reduce it. And if they Zamasu Sacred Disbelief and hit our 5-drop play, the vanilla would not come in, or if they hit the initial vanilla, then we'd be locked out of our play, right? So this is a good way to counter that. You can just play this, and instead it's got dual attack, so it comes in, reduces their card by 20k, and then on each time it swings, it reduces their card by 20k. It's also just good pressure versus Hatch. Dual attack gains double strike if it kills a card through its skill. I don't know if I would play it again in the future. I probably would switch this to Cell Max. Robert DeCoste on my team did play against Hatch, and Cell Max was just crucial being a dual attacker into that matchup. 1 copy of Violent Rays for the mirror. For Vegito X, it's just nice having that 5th floodgate, right? It's not really a great floodgate in that it shuts out either decks permanently. It doesn't automatically beat both decks, right? It's not just going to be your safe all, but it is going to reduce half of their tools, especially when you get into the later turns, like turn 5 or 4. Violent Rays really makes their turn a lot more awkward to play. By then, your defense is more situated. You can combo out of their lower attacks. 1 copy of Demigro, Heavenly Wizard. This was for the Vegito X matchup. We thought we would need an extra copy of Anti-Barrier. As we played the matchup, we realized this deck seemingly has a 100-0 in that matchup, and we don't really actually need this card. 1 copy of Secret ID. This is for the Mirror / Tapion and Bulma. And then 2 copies of Deborah, Ritual Hand. So hand control is definitely this deck's worst matchup. So this card will probably come up to 3. When you're playing this deck in testing, you're going to be like, man, how does he have the energy to play this card? Well, when you play it versus green floodgates you out, so you're going to pass with 3 energy, 2 energy up, passing the turn. One of those energy is committed to Explosive Dance, and then when they eventually go to discard your hand, that second energy is going to be for the Dabura, letting you draw back into the game and give you extra attackers. That's the entire 65, 66 if you count the leader card deck list. I'm going to be honest, this deck is not that fun to play. It is cheap, it is competitive, it is powerful. Its lines are pretty linear. Your defense and your offensive lines are kind of the same. You don't have any bombs, so you're kind of just doing the same thing until you can out-resource your opponent. That part of the deck is not too fun. It is fun that it works smoothly, and it does exactly what the deck was intended to do. So that's our kidku deck list for this first event. It'll probably evolve moving forward. We found a lot of dead cards and ratios we weren't a big fan of, so I'm excited to see what you guys can come up with for this deck. Other than that, it was really fun. As usual, talking to you guys at the event. I've met so many new players at this event, and that's really awesome because I typically go to the event and I get to meet so many of you that I know most of you when I show back up to the event. But this time at the event, I knew maybe half of the players that were playing Masters. And that tells me that we have like, people are jumping back into the game. They love playing this game. And I think we're about to see another resurgence in the game. But tell me what you think about this deck, how you think it's going to run the meta, or what you think about Masters in general. And I will catch you guys next time.